Whew, what are we doing now? What's on the next? Let's see, perform the specified operations. All right, so we're looking at complex numbers. And we've been adding and subtracting, and I think we're going to do some multiplication. I think we are. Trying to figure it out myself. Okay. What color did we say we were going to use? Purple? Alright, looks good. I don't know what the story is here. It won't write. The pen won't write. What is up with that? Alright, having some technical difficulties. Huh. Okay, there it is. Sorry about that. I could have did a rewind, but I didn't. Let's say we have the square root of, -3 times the square root of -2. Okay, we want to write this now, remember. What do we want to do? Write it in A plus B form? Well, we could if we wanted to, A plus BI. But let's just, let's see what we get when we multiply these guys together. Okay, so remember, this can be rewritten as the square root of -1 times 3. Okay, that's this guy right here, times the square root of -1 times 2. We can break this up as the square root of -1 times the square root of 3 times the square. So I'm taking these baby steps here, not leaving anything out, you know. Pretend that you're learning this for the first time. What did we say the square root of -1 was? I. There's nothing more we can do with that. What did we say this was? I. And there's nothing more we can do with that. Okay, but we can't leave it like this. So let's rewrite. I times I is I squared. And of course, the square root of 3 times the square root of 2, we could just go ahead and put all that into the radical. Okay. What did we say I squared was? -1. So what did all this simplify down to? Negative square root of 6. See that? The negative square root of 6. But what happened to the imaginary part? It's over here. Okay. Okay, let's see what else we got. Let's do another one here for the fun of it. How about we add the square root of -5 times the square root of -10. Okay, so once again, we can rewrite that as -1 times 5 times the square root of -1 times. Now, I'm going to write this one as 2 times 5, and I'll tell you the reason why here in just a second. We can break this up. Oops. Times. Okay, I just rewrote that like that. I times I is I squared times. We can take both of these under the radical here. So this is 5 times 2 times 5. Okay. I squared is -1 times. Now we have 5 times 5, which is 25. Actually, you know what? I'll just rewrite it over here. So this is actually 25 times 2. We're breaking this up. The square root of 25 is 5. And then, of course, we can't break that down anymore. Right? Can't break that down anymore. Where am I at here? Oh, there I am. Okay. Of course, you wouldn't leave it like that. -5 square roots of 2. If we were writing it, right, as a complex number, of course, this would be 0 over here. Okay, we are multiplying. Here's a tricky one here. Tricky. This could be tricky if you're not careful. So what happens when you square a square root? Let's not do that just yet. Let's rewrite this as, okay, I'm going to actually rewrite this. Since there's two of them, we can rewrite it like this. You see that? So we break this up. This just becomes what? The square root of 10i times the square root of 10i. Okay, we're skipping steps now. We have I times I, which is I squared. So this really becomes what? The square root of 100. Okay, you can rewrite both these under the radical, and 10 times 10 is 100 times I squared. But what's the square root of 100? 10. And what's this? Negative. So let's just bring that out. Now you could, okay, let's look at this. Now this makes logical sense, doesn't it? We have negative 10 times negative 10. And a negative times a negative is positive. Wrong. Be careful. That logic don't work. We got negatives under the radical. See that? That number and that number are two different numbers. But what you could have done was you square a square root and you get what's under the radical here. That happened to be negative 10. To play it safe, you could work it out like this. Okay? Be careful. There's tricks out there. Tricks. Okay, 1 plus the square root of negative 1 times 1 minus the square root of negative 1. So let's multiply these out. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times the square root of negative 1, but remember there's a minus sign out here, so then we have the square root of negative 1 times 1, and then we have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1, but we have this minus here, so this is going to be minus. So we have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. Okay, let's simplify this down. Well, these guys are going to cancel out. They're like terms. And of course, this is 1 times 1 is 1 squared. Now, we have negative, what is this? I squared. Right? What's I squared? Now be careful on this one here. I squared is negative 1. You got a negative and a negative, makes that positive, so this becomes 2. Okay, that one there could be tricky. You don't put that negative in parentheses. Where are we at? 8 minutes. Let's just go ahead and work some more out. Maybe you'll hang in there. 1 plus I times 1 minus I. You see that? Does that look familiar? So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative I is just negative I. I times 1 is I. And I times I, that's going to make that negative I squared. These guys cancel out. What is I squared now? See, this is where you got to be careful. You see that? I is negative 1 and it's squared. So that makes that, wait a minute. Something is fishy in St. Louis. I just about made a mistake. Yes. Okay. So I times I is I squared. but I squared, this is where the mistake almost was made. I squared is -1. Okay, negative and negative is positive, so technically, right, you would have that. I need to look at something here real quick. Okay. Anyway, I about made a mistake. All right, what do we got? One more. This is one more for the road. 4 plus 5i quantity squared. Okay, so we got to rewrite this as 4 plus 5i times 4 plus 5i. So 4 times 4, 16. Okay, 4 times 5i is 20i. 5i times 4, 20i, and 5i times 5i is 25i squared. Okay, let's look. 16. So we have 20i plus 20i. You have 40i vision plus, okay, what is this equal to? This is -1, remember? So let's just write it. Is equal to, now, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite it again. Minus 25. Let's bring that minus out front. So we have 16. Let's see, 5 and 4 is 9. So this is going to end up being -9 plus 40i. That's in that standard form, a plus bi. Make sure that's in the standard form there. Bam. All right, you should have caught on to that. Multiplying complex numbers together, getting them in the standard form. All right, we're going to do some dividing in the next problem. Anyway, see you over there. Bye.